Now let's begin. Derek Rosales had built his life on simple principles. Work hard, protect your family, and never back down from what's right. At 34, he worked as a machinist at Northridge Manufacturing, pulling alternating day and night shifts that paid well enough to keep his family comfortable in their modest three-bedroom house on Maple Street. His wife Constance taught second grade at Lincoln Elementary, and their 7-year-old son Lucas was the center of their world, bright, curious, with his mother's green eyes and Derek's dark hair. The Rosales family seemed ordinary from the outside. Derek and Constance had met 9 years ago at a community barbecue. She'd been drawn to his quiet confidence, the way he listened more than he spoke, how his rare smiles reached his eyes. He'd fallen for her warmth, her laugh, the way she saw good in everyone. They'd married within a year, and Lucas arrived 2 years later, completing what Derek considered his greatest achievement. Constance's father, William Johnston, had been a fixture in their lives since the beginning. A retired insurance executive, William was 68, silver-haired, with the kind of distinguished appearance that made people trust him instinctively. He wore expensive sweaters, drove a pristine Lincoln Continental, and spoke in measured tones that commanded respect. After Constance's mother Helen died from cancer 4 years ago, William had grown closer to the family, visiting more frequently, always bearing gifts for Lucas, video games, remote control cars, expensive toys that made the boy's eyes light up. Derek had never particularly warmed to his father-in-law, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly why. William was polite, generous, helpful around the house. Maybe it was the way William sometimes looked at him, a hint of condescension in those pale blue eyes, as if Derek's blue-collar job marked him as somehow lesser. Or maybe it was how William would correct Derek's parenting. "That's not how we did things in our family," with that thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. But Constance adored her father, especially after losing her mother, so Derek kept his unease to himself. The night shifts had started 3 months ago. Northridge had landed a major contract requiring round-the-clock production, and the premium pay was too good to refuse. Derek worked Tuesday through Saturday nights, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., leaving Constance and Lucas alone. William had offered to stay over on those nights to help out, sleeping in the guest room. Constance had been grateful. Derek had been uncertain. But what could he say? The man was family. It was late September when Derek first noticed the change in Lucas. The boy had always been energetic, talkative, eager to show Derek his drawings or tell him about school. But he'd grown quiet, withdrawn. He picked at his dinner, dark circles forming under his eyes. When Derek tried to engage him, "How was school, buddy?" Lucas would shrug, mumble fine, and retreat to his room. "He's just adjusting to you being gone at night," Constance had said, though worry creased her forehead. "He misses you." Derek had knelt down to Lucas's level one evening, placing a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Hey, champ. You okay? You can talk to me about anything." Lucas's green eyes had filled with tears. He'd opened his mouth, closed it, then shaken his head and run upstairs. Derek had stood there, a cold dread settling in his stomach that he couldn't explain. The behavioral changes escalated. Lucas started having nightmares, waking up screaming. He refused to go to bed before Derek left for work, clinging to his father's leg, begging him to stay. "Please, Daddy. Please don't go. I don't want Grandpa here." "Grandpa loves you, Lucas," Constance would say, peeling the crying boy away. "He's just here to keep us safe while Daddy works." But Lucas would sob harder, and Derek would leave for work with his heart heavy, that inexplicable dread growing stronger. Derek started paying closer attention. He noticed how Lucas flinched when William entered a room. How the boy would find excuses not to be alone with his grandfather. How he'd grown unusually quiet and compliant around William, so different from his normal spirited self. One morning, after his shift, Derek found Lucas sitting in the bathtub fully clothed, scrubbing his skin raw with a washcloth. Red marks covered his arms. "Lucas!" Derek had rushed forward, turning off the water, wrapping his son in a towel. "What are you doing?" "I'm dirty," Lucas whispered, staring at nothing. "Grandpa says I'm dirty." Derek's blood had run cold. "What do you mean? Why would Grandpa say that?" But Lucas had clammed up, shaking his head violently. "Nothing. I didn't say anything. Don't tell Grandpa. Please don't tell Grandpa." The fear in his son's voice had shaken Derek to his core. He'd held Lucas, feeling the boy tremble against him, and made a decision. He needed to know what was happening in his house when he wasn't there. That evening, Derek approached Constance in their bedroom. "I think something's wrong with Lucas. Something involving your father." Constance had stiffened. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm saying our son is terrified, and it started when William began staying over." "My father has been nothing but helpful," Constance said, her voice cold. "He's grieving my mother, and he loves Lucas. If you have a problem with him, Derek, just say it. But don't drag our son into whatever masculine posturing." "This isn't about me and William," Derek interrupted, keeping his voice level despite the anger rising in his chest. "This is about Lucas washing himself raw and saying he's dirty. About him begging me not to leave him at night." Constance's expression had softened slightly. "He's just going through a phase. Kids act out. My father would never." She'd stopped, shaking her head. "I can't even believe we're having this conversation." Derek realized he was alone in his suspicions. Constance couldn't, see her father as anything but the devoted grandfather, the grieving widower who'd lost his wife and clung to his family. Derek needed proof. He called his supervisor, Craig Beck, an older man who'd always been fair to him. "Craig, I need to take sick leave tomorrow night. You feeling all right, Rosales? Just need one night. Personal matter." Craig had granted it without further questions. Derek told Constance he was working as usual, kissed Lucas goodbye. The boy had gripped his hand so tightly Derek almost stayed right then, and drove around the block. He parked 3 streets over and walked back, entering his house through the basement door he'd deliberately left unlocked. The basement was finished, with a small bathroom Derek sometimes used to clean up after yard work. He sat on the cold concrete floor behind the furnace, his service weapon, a Glock 19 he'd kept from his brief stint in the army, tucked in his waistband. He'd never imagined using it outside a range, but tonight, he didn't know what he might need. Above him, he heard the evening routine. Constance putting Lucas to bed, her cheerful voice reading a story. Lucas's small voice, quiet, subdued. The house settling into nighttime silence. Constance going to her bedroom. The television murmuring through the walls. At 8:45, Derek heard a car pull into the driveway. Williams Lincoln. The front door opened and closed. Constance's voice, warm and welcoming. "Hi, Dad. Lucas is already asleep." Good. William's cultured voice replied. "You should get some rest too, sweetheart. I'll just check on the boy, make sure he's settled." Derek's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to rush upstairs, to stop whatever was about to happen. But he needed to know. He needed Constance to know. He needed proof. William's footsteps climbed the stairs. Constance's bedroom door closed. The house went quiet except for the low drone of her television. Derek moved silently up the basement stairs, years of hunting with his uncle teaching him how to move without sound. The main floor was dark. He crept to the staircase, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might give him away. William stood outside Lucas's room, hand on the doorknob. Even in the dim hallway light, Derek could see the change in the man's posture. The distinguished gentleman was gone. In his place stood something predatory, eager. William opened the door and slipped inside. Derek heard the lock click. He waited, every second an eternity. From behind the door came Lucas's small voice. "Grandpa? I'm sleepy." "I know, buddy. Grandpa just wants to spend time with you. I don't want to play the game. The game is our special secret, remember? You're such a good boy when we play the game." Derek heard his son begin to cry, soft, defeated sobs that shattered something inside him. Shoo. Don't cry. If you cry, Daddy will be upset with you. You don't want Daddy to be upset, do you? You don't want me to tell him you're being bad." The crying stopped. Silence fell, worse than any sound. Derek's vision tunneled. He climbed the stairs, no longer caring about stealth. He reached Lucas's door, tried the handle. Locked. He raised his foot and kicked, putting all his weight, all his rage, all his fear into it. The frame splintered. The door crashed inward. The scene Derek walked into would haunt him for the rest of his life. Lucas sat on his bed in his pajamas, tears streaming down his face, frozen in terror. William knelt beside the bed, his hand on Lucas's knee, his other hand reaching up, and in that split second, Derek saw everything. The truth of the past 3 months, the source of his son's nightmares, the reason for those terrified eyes. William turned, shock registering on his face. "Derek? What are you?" Derek crossed the room in 2 strides. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around William's throat, lifting the older man off the ground. William's eyes bulged, his hands clawing at Derek's grip, but Derek's rage gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. "Lucas, go to your mother," Derek said, his voice deadly calm despite the inferno inside him. "Right now." Lucas scrambled off the bed and ran from the room, his footsteps pounding down the hallway. Derek heard Constance's door open, heard her confused voice. "Lucas? What's wrong? What was that noise?" William gurgled, his face turning purple. Derek's other hand drew back, fist clenched. Every fiber of his being wanted to end this, to make William pay for every tear, every nightmare, every moment of innocence stolen from his son. But Lucas's voice echoed in his mind. "Don't tell Grandpa. Please don't tell Grandpa." The fear, the shame, the way his son had been manipulated into silence. Derek slammed William against the wall, but released his throat. The old man collapsed, gasping, coughing. Derek pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need police at 842 Maple Street. I've caught someone assaulting my son. His voice broke on the last word. Constance appeared in the doorway, Lucas clinging to her waist. She looked from Derek to her father crumpled on the floor, confusion warring with dawning horror on her face. "Derek, what?" Then she saw William's expression, the guilt written plainly there, and her face went white. "Dad." William looked up at his daughter, tears streaming down his face now. "Constance, it's not. He's lying." But Constance's eyes had found Lucas's pajamas, slightly disheveled. The lock on the door, broken. Her son's tear-stained face, the way he trembled against her. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, no? Dad, please tell me. Please." William's facade crumbled completely. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm sick. I need help. I didn't mean. It just happened, after Helen died. I was so lonely, and Lucas, he's so sweet, so innocent. I just—" "Stop talking," Derek growled. He moved to position himself between William and his family, his body a wall. "Don't say another word." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Neighbors' lights flickered on up and down the street. Constance slid down the doorframe, pulling Lucas into her lap, rocking him, crying into his hair. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Mommy didn't know. Mommy should have known." Derek knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around both of them. Lucas buried his face in Derek's chest, and Derek felt the boy's small body shaking with sobs, releasing months of trapped fear. The police arrived. First the patrol units, lights strobing red and blue across the quiet suburban street, then the detectives. Officers Christopher Shelton and Jen Pacheco were the first through the door, hands on their weapons until they assessed the scene. Derek sitting against the wall with his family, William huddled in the corner, broken. "I'm Derek Rosales. This is my house. That man," Derek pointed at William, his voice hard as steel, "is my father-in-law. I caught him in my son's locked bedroom. My son has been showing signs of abuse for months. I came home and found him, with my son." Officer Shelton's expression darkened. He'd been on the force for 15 years and had seen too many cases like this. He called for backup, for Child Protective Services, for a detective specialized in crimes against children. Detective Andre Peck arrived within 20 minutes. He was a large black man with kind eyes and a gentle voice that belied the steel underneath. He'd spent 12 years working sex crimes, and he knew how to handle traumatized children. He knelt before Lucas, who still clung to Derek. "Hey there, Lucas. My name is Andre. I'm a detective, which means I help keep kids safe. You know what? You're very brave. Your daddy did the right thing, and now we're going to make sure you're safe. Is it okay if we talk a little bit?" Lucas looked up at Derek, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, buddy. You can tell Detective Peck the truth. You're not in trouble. Grandpa is the one in trouble." Over the next hour, with a child psychologist present and Derek and Constance nearby, Lucas told his story in halting, broken sentences. It had started 6 weeks after William began staying over. The special game that Grandpa said was their secret. The threats, not violent, but insidious. "Daddy will be so angry if you tell. Mommy will cry. You'll get in trouble. You're a bad boy if you tell." The manipulation of a child's trust, twisted into compliance. Derek listened to his son's small voice describing horrors no child should experience, and something inside him changed fundamentally. The law would take its course, he knew that. But it wouldn't be enough. It could never be enough. William was arrested, handcuffed, read his rights. As the officers led him past Derek, the old man looked at him with pleading eyes. "Derek, please. Tell Constance I'm sorry. I'm sick. I need treatment, not." Derek stood, moving so close to William that Officer Shelton had to put a restraining hand on his shoulder. "You're going to prison," Derek said quietly, his voice carrying a promise. "And I'm going to make sure everyone there knows exactly what you did. That's not a threat. That's a guarantee." William's face went ashen. He knew what happened to child predators in prison. Derek watched as they put him in the squad car, watched as the neighbors gathered on their lawns, watched as the man who'd violated his son's innocence was driven away into the night. But Derek knew this was only the beginning. The legal system would grind slowly. There would be trials, lawyers, procedures. William came from money, had connections, could afford the best defense. Derek had already decided. If the law failed his son, he would not. Constance sat in their living room, devastated. Her father, the man who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd walked her down the aisle, who'd held Lucas when he was born, was a monster. She'd let him into their home, trusted him with their son, dismissed Derek's concerns. "I should have listened to you," she whispered, her face blotchy from crying. "You tried to tell me something was wrong, and oh God, Derek, what have I done?" Derek sat beside her, taking her hand. "You loved your father. You couldn't have known. This isn't on you." "It is," she said bitterly. "Lucas tried to tell me. The nightmares, the fear. I just kept saying it was a phase, that he'd adjust. I chose my father over my son." "No," Derek said firmly. "Your father is a predator. He spent decades learning how to hide what he is, how to manipulate people. This is on him, Constance. Only him." But Derek could see the guilt eating at her, and he knew their marriage, their whole family, would never be the same. Lucas slept in their bed that night, between them, Derek's hand resting protectively on his son's small shoulder. Tomorrow would bring CPS interviews, medical examinations, the beginning of a long legal battle. But tonight, Derek held his family close and planned. William Johnston had money, influence, a clean record. He would hire expensive lawyers who would try to paint this as a misunderstanding, as Derek overreacting, as a child's confused memories. The system was slow, often inadequate. Predators sometimes walked free on technicalities. Derek wouldn't allow that. The morning brought a parade of officials. Child Protective Services sent a caseworker named Isabel Nolan, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd seen too many broken children. She was thorough but compassionate, interviewing Lucas with the same child psychologist from the night before, Dr. Alvin Hodge. They documented everything, took photographs of Lucas's bedroom, the broken lock, collected evidence. Detective Peck returned with a warrant for William's house, searching for additional evidence, photographs, videos, anything that would strengthen the case. What they found made Derek's stomach turn. William had been meticulous. Hidden cameras in Lucas's room, activated during his visits. Hundreds of images, carefully organized, dated. Not just Lucas. There were other children too, faces Derek didn't recognize, spanning decades. "He's been doing this for a long time," Peck told Derek privately, his jaw tight. "We're identifying the other victims now. Your son, he's not the first, Derek. And if you hadn't caught him, he wouldn't have been the last." The knowledge that this had been ongoing, systematic, that William had spent years perfecting his predation, filled Derek with a cold fury that wouldn't abate. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks out. William's lawyer, a shark named Hugh Grimes, had already filed for bail, arguing his client was elderly, had no prior record, posed no flight risk. The prosecutor, a young woman named Shalia Dotson fresh from the DA's office, fought against it, but the judge, an older man named Matthew Atkins, granted house arrest with an ankle monitor. Derek sat in the courtroom, watching William walk out with Grimes, and felt the justice system failing his son in real time. "He has assets," Shalia explained afterwards, frustration evident. "Political connections. Judge Atkins is old school, believes in innocent until proven guilty to a fault. I'm sorry, Mr. Rosales. I fought as hard as I could." "When's the trial?" Derek asked. "Probably 6 months, maybe longer. Grimes will file every motion possible to delay. That's how they work. Drag it out. Hope witnesses forget details. Hope the child victim becomes too traumatized to testify effectively." Derek nodded slowly. 6 months of William sitting comfortably in his mansion, probably already working on his defense, manipulating the narrative. 6 months of Lucas having nightmares, knowing the man who hurt him was still out there. Unacceptable. Derek began his research that night. William lived alone now in the family estate on Riverside Drive, 3 acres, gated, security system. His assets included the house, worth approximately $2 million, investment portfolios, the insurance agency he'd sold for $8 million 15 years ago. He had connections throughout the county, golf buddies who were judges, business associates, charity boards he'd sat on. The kind of man whose respectability was armor. But Derek had learned something in the army. Everyone has vulnerabilities. Every fortress has a weak point. You just had to find it. He started attending Lucas's therapy sessions with Dr. Hodge, learning about the grooming process, the psychological manipulation. He researched similar cases, legal precedents, outcomes. Too many ended in plea deals, reduced sentences, predators serving minimal time, and emerging to offend again. He also started making calls. His old army buddy Tomas Hill now worked private security in Chicago. Derek had saved Tomas's life in Afghanistan when an IED hit their convoy, pulling him from a burning Humvee. Tomas owed him, and Tomas had connections, people who could find information, who operated in gray areas the law couldn't touch. "What do you need?" Tomas asked when Derek explained the situation. "Everything on William Johnston. Financial records, hidden assets, associates, patterns. Anything I can use." "You planning something illegal, brother?" Derek was quiet for a moment. "I'm planning to protect my son, however necessary." "I'll make some calls," Tomas said. "But Derek? Be careful. Guys like Johnston, they have resources. And if you're thinking about taking matters into your own hands, I know the risks." What Derek didn't tell Tomas was that he'd already made peace with those risks. He would do whatever it took, pay whatever price, to ensure William Johnston never hurt another child. While Derek planned, Constance spiraled. She'd taken leave from her teaching job, unable to face her students while her own son suffered. She spent hours crying, hours apologizing to Lucas, hours locked in the bathroom where Derek could hear her sobbing. Their marriage strained under the weight of betrayal and guilt. One night, 3 weeks after William's arrest, Derek found her in Lucas's room, sitting on his bed in the dark. "He used to read to Lucas," she said quietly. "After Mom died, he'd come over and read bedtime stories. Lucas loved it. I thought it was so sweet, this bond between them. And all along." Her voice broke. Derek sat beside her. "Constance, you couldn't have known. But you suspected. You asked me, and I shut you down. I chose him over you, over Lucas's safety. He's your father. Biology and history are powerful things. He spent your whole life building your trust, your love. That's what predators do. They don't look like monsters. They look like family." She turned to him, her eyes red and swollen. "How can you even stand to look at me? I brought him into our home. I defended him. I let him hurt our baby." Derek took her hands in his. "Because you're a victim too. He manipulated you just like he manipulated Lucas. The only person responsible for this is William Johnston." But even as he said it, Derek wondered if their marriage could survive this. Every time Constance looked at Lucas, he saw the guilt eating at her. Every time she looked at Derek, he saw the shame of having doubted him. Some wounds, even when not your fault, leave scars too deep to heal. The information from Tomas arrived via encrypted email 2 weeks later. It was comprehensive and damning. William's finances showed regular payments to offshore accounts, shell companies that Tomas's people had traced to several other men, known sex offenders, some registered, others who'd bought their way out of consequences. The network ran deeper than Derek had imagined. William wasn't just a predator. He was connected to a ring of them, trading materials, sharing victims. There were also files on Grimes, the defense attorney. He'd represented multiple clients on similar charges, always getting them reduced sentences or acquittals. His own financials showed unexplained income, luxury purchases that didn't match his legitimate earnings. He wasn't just a defense attorney. He was protecting these monsters because he was part of their world. Derek's hands shook as he read through the evidence. This went beyond William. This was systemic, organized evil with legal protection. He could turn this over to Detective Peck, let the FBI investigate. But investigations took time, and these men had covered their tracks well. Charges might not stick, prosecutors might decline to pursue without ironclad evidence. And meanwhile, children continued to be hurt. Derek made his decision. He began with surveillance. William's house arrest meant he was home, monitored by an ankle bracelet with a perimeter he couldn't leave. But that also meant Derek knew exactly where he was every night. He drove past the estate, noting the security cameras, easily disabled if you knew how, the patrol schedule of the private security William had hired, every 2 hours, predictable, the layout of the property, master bedroom on the ground floor, accessible through the garden. He wasn't planning murder. Derek had killed in war, knew what it did to your soul, and he wouldn't let William turn him into that. But he would ensure justice, one way or another. The trial date was set for early December, for months away. Shalia Dotson called Derek with an update. Grimes is pushing for a plea deal. 5 years, registration as a sex offender, supervised probation after release. 5 years. Derek's voice was ice. He abused my son for 3 months. There are hundreds of images. Evidence of other victims. I know. I'm fighting it. But the judge, Atkins, is suggesting we consider it. Says a trial would be traumatic for Lucas, that a guaranteed conviction with some prison time is better than risking an acquittal. Derek hung up and punched the wall, his knuckles splitting. 5 years. William would be 73 when he got out, still capable of hurting children. The ankle monitor, the registration, predators found ways around those. They always did. That night, Derek sat with Lucas, reading him a story, something he'd done every night since the discovery, reclaiming the bedtime ritual William had corrupted. Lucas had gained some weight back, smiled more often, but the nightmares persisted. He flinched at unexpected sounds, avoided physical contact with most adults except Derek and Constance. "Daddy," Lucas asked as Derek closed the book. "Is Grandpa going to come back?" "No, buddy. He's never coming near you again. Promise." Derek looked into his son's eyes, saw the fear and hope warring there, and made a vow. "I promise. On my life, Lucas. He will never hurt you or anyone else again." It was a promise Derek intended to keep, whatever the cost. Over the next weeks, Derek became someone new. He still went through the motions. Work, family dinners, Lucas's therapy appointments. But inside, he was calculating, planning. He used the darknet contacts Tomas had provided, reaching out to people who existed in society's shadows. He learned about the prison system, about how information flowed inside, about how certain prisoners were treated when their crimes became known. He also learned about accidents, how ankle monitors could malfunction, how home security systems could be bypassed, how someone might, hypothetically, enter a house unseen and leave a message that would terrify a predator into cooperation. Detective Peck called in early November with news. "We've identified 3 other victims from William's files. 2 are adults now, willing to testify. The third is a current case, 9-year-old boy, Isaac Olson. His parents had no idea. William was his piano teacher." Derek's stomach clenched. While William sat comfortably under house arrest, another family had just discovered their world was shattered. "There's more," Peck continued. "One of the adult victims, Craig Beck." "Wait," Derek interrupted. "Craig Beck? My supervisor at Northridge." "Same person. William was his insurance agent 20 years ago." According to Craig's statement, the abuse happened over 2 years when Craig was 12. He's been carrying this his whole life, Derek. Seeing William's arrest in the news gave him courage to come forward. Derek thought of Craig, the quiet, kind man who'd given him the night off without questions, who'd seemed to understand what Derek needed before Derek said it. Craig had known, had maybe seen the signs in Lucas that Derek described, because he'd lived through it himself. "How many more?" Derek asked quietly. "We don't know. Could be dozens. We're working with the FBI now. This is bigger than local jurisdiction." "But Derek, Grimes is going to use this. He'll claim the case is too complex, too contaminated with multiple accusations. He'll argue for dismissal, or at minimum, a separate trial just for Lucas's case, where he can undermine your son's testimony without the weight of other victims." The system, Derek realized, was designed to protect men like William. Wealthy, connected, white-collar predators who could afford lawyers clever enough to exploit every loophole. Every procedural protection meant to ensure fairness, but twisted into shields for the guilty. He thanked Peck and ended the call. Then he retrieved his Glock from the safe, checked the clip, and sat in his garage for an hour, holding it, thinking about how easy it would be to end this. One bullet. One moment of justice that the courts might never provide. But he put the gun away. Not because he wasn't willing to cross that line, but because he wanted William to suffer longer than a bullet would allow. He wanted William to experience fear, helplessness, the destruction of everything he valued. He wanted William to know what it felt like to be a victim, and Derek had a plan for exactly that. The night of November 15th, Derek told Constance he was working late. Instead, he drove to William's estate, parking 2 blocks away. He'd spent weeks studying the security, the patrol patterns, the blind spots. He wore dark clothes, a ski mask, gloves, nothing traceable. The security guard made his rounds at 9 p.m. Derek waited until 9:15, then moved through the shadows of the neighboring property, scaling the fence at its lowest point. The cameras faced outward, toward the street. William's arrogance assumed threats came from outside, not from someone willing to breach his fortress. Derek crossed the manicured lawn to the garden doors. The lock was high-end but mechanical, not electronic. 3 minutes with a tension wrench and rake pick, skills from his army training, and he was inside. The house was silent, lit only by a few dim night lights. Derek knew the layout from property records and satellite images. He moved through the kitchen into the main hallway, toward the master bedroom. William sat in an armchair, reading. The ankle monitor blinked on his leg. His prison, though more comfortable than any cell Derek's son had been trapped in. Derek stepped into the doorway. "Hello, William." William's head snapped up, his book falling. Fear flooded his face. The same fear Lucas must have felt every time William entered his room. "Derek? What are you? You can't be here. This is breaking." "You're going to listen," Derek interrupted, his voice calm, cold. "And you're not going to call for help. Because if you do, I'll tell every prisoner you're about to spend time with exactly what you did. I'll make sure your life inside is even worse than it's going to be." William's mouth opened and closed. Derek pulled out his phone, showing photos, screenshots from the dark web forums Tomas's people had infiltrated, showing William's username, his posts, his traded files. Evidence that would destroy him even if the legal case somehow failed. "I have copies everywhere," Derek said. "If anything happens to me, they go to the police, the media, the prison where you'll be housed. I've made connections with people inside the system. They're waiting for you, William. They know what you are." "Please," William whispered, tears streaming. "Please, Derek. I'm sick. I need help. I'll testify against the others. I'll cooperate. Just please." "You're going to reject the plea deal?" Derek continued as if William hadn't spoken. "You're going to plead guilty to every charge. You're going to accept the maximum sentence. And you're going to allocate. That means you're going to stand in court and describe, in detail, what you did to Lucas, to Craig Beck, to Isaac Olson, to every victim we've identified." "I can't. The publicity, my reputation." Derek crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing William by his expensive shirt, lifting him from the chair. "Your reputation is over. Your life as you knew it is over. You have 2 choices. You do what I've told you, or I make your existence so horrific you'll beg for death. I have resources you can't imagine, William. I have friends who make your lawyer connections look like nothing. And I have absolutely nothing to lose, because you already took everything that mattered." He released William, who crumpled back into the chair, sobbing. Derek looked down at this pathetic man, this monster who'd hidden behind wealth and respectability, and felt nothing but contempt. "You have until Monday to call your lawyer," Derek said. "Tell him you want to change your plea. Full confession. Maximum sentence. Or Monday night, I come back, and we have a different conversation." He left the same way he came, unseen, a ghost in the night. The security guard passed on his rounds 10 minutes later, unaware that William Johnston's carefully constructed world had just collapsed. Monday morning, Hugh Grimes called Shalia Dodson, his voice confused and frustrated. "My client wants to change his plea. He's refusing to fight the charges. Says he wants to plead guilty to everything." Shalia, equally baffled, called Derek. "I don't know what happened, but William Johnston just fired his lawyer and requested a public defender. He's pleading guilty. He's waiving his right to a trial." Derek held the phone, relief and grim satisfaction washing over him. "When's the sentencing?" 3 weeks. December 8th. "Derek, this is unusual. Grimes is threatening to file motions claiming his client is being coerced or is mentally incompetent, But Johnston is adamant. What happened? Justice, Derek said simply. Justice happened. The courtroom on December 8th was packed. Local media had latched onto the story. Respected businessman, pillar of the community, revealed as systematic predator. The other victims were there. Craig Beck, who Derek embraced before the hearing. Isaac Olson's parents, devastated but grateful. 2 adult survivors who'd found courage in numbers. William stood before Judge Atkins, flanked by his court-appointed attorney. He'd aged decades in 3 weeks, his silver hair now white, his shoulders stooped. He read his allocution in a broken voice, confessing to years of abuse, manipulation, predation. Lucas wasn't in the courtroom. Dr. Hodge had advised against it. But Constance was, crying silent tears as she heard her father admit to monstrous crimes. Judge Atkins, his face grim, sentenced William to 40 years without possibility of parole. At 68, it was effectively a life sentence. Mr. Johnston, the judge said, you abused positions of trust, violated the most vulnerable members of society, and showed systematic, calculating evil. You will spend the remainder of your life in prison, and I hope you find no peace there. William was led away in shackles, his head down, his expensive suit replaced by prison orange. Derek watched him go and felt a chapter close. But the story wasn't over. 2 weeks later, Detective Peck called. Derek, we've made arrests in the wider network. William's files led us to 6 other men, including some prominent names. The FBI is involved now, treating it as a trafficking conspiracy. Your information, the financial records, the connections, it was crucial. Derek had anonymously provided everything Tomas's people had gathered, careful to leave no trail back to himself. The dominoes were falling, predators being pulled into light, their victims finding justice. There's something else, Peck said. Hugh Grimes. The FBI found evidence he was facilitating the network, providing legal protection in exchange for access. He's been arrested too. Derek closed his eyes, satisfaction warming him. The lawyer who'd made a career defending monsters was now facing his own reckoning. At Northridge Manufacturing, Craig Beck approached Derek during a break. I heard about the other arrests. The network breaking down. I don't know how it happened, but I wanted to thank you. Your son's case, your courage to act immediately. It gave me the strength to come forward. And now, maybe, I can finally heal. They stood together in the break room. 2 fathers separated by decades, but united by trauma and survival. And Derek realized his actions had ripples beyond what he'd imagined. Lucas's nightmare had exposed systemic evil. William's downfall had freed other victims to speak. The legal system, however slow, was working because Derek had forced it to. Christmas came, subdued but genuine. Lucas had good days and bad days, but Dr. Hodge said he was making remarkable progress. Children are resilient, she explained. With proper support, therapy, and a safe environment, they can heal. Lucas knows he's believed, knows he's protected. That makes all the difference. Derek watched Lucas play with new toys, given by Constance's colleagues, by neighbors, by Craig Beck, who'd become an unexpected family friend. His son laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Constance was in therapy too, working through her guilt and betrayal. Their marriage was fragile but surviving. Both of them committed to Lucas first, to each other second, to rebuilding what William had damaged. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks burst over their neighborhood, Derek stood on his porch, beer in hand, reflecting on the year. He'd become someone he never imagined, a man who'd broken laws, threatened violence, operated in moral gray zones. But he'd protected his son. He'd saved other children. He'd dismantled a network of predators. The Glock remained in his safe, unfired. He'd never needed to pull the trigger because sometimes the threat was enough. Sometimes forcing the system to work was more effective than working outside it. In February, Derek received a letter. Prison mail, forwarded through the prosecutor's office. William's handwriting, shaky now, filled 3 pages. Derek almost threw it away unread, but something made him open it. Derek, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to Lucas, to the others, was unforgivable. You were right when you said I'm a monster. I've spent 2 months in here coming to terms with that. I'm writing because you should know. I'm cooperating with the FBI. I've given them names, evidence, connections to rings operating in 4 states. 37 men have been arrested because of my testimony. I don't know if that matters to you, if it makes any difference, but I wanted you to know. I think about Lucas every day, about what I stole from him, about the damage I caused. If I could undo it, if I could go back and be the grandfather he deserved, I would. But I can't. All I can do is rot in here and hope that my cooperation saves other children. You didn't have to threaten me that night. Seeing the truth in your eyes, the contempt, the disgust, was enough. I saw myself as you saw me, and I couldn't live with that person anymore. Prison is my penance, but it's not enough. Nothing ever will be. Tell Lucas I'm sorry. Tell him it was never his fault, that he's brave, that he's stronger than I ever was. And tell Constance I love her, even though I have no right to anymore. William Johnston, number 47829. Derek read it twice, then burned it in the fireplace. The apology meant nothing. The cooperation was good, more predators off the streets, but it didn't erase the pain, the damage, the innocence stolen. But it confirmed what Derek had known. William was broken. The man who'd wielded power and respectability was now just another inmate, living in fear, knowing every day that his fellow prisoners knew what he was. Prison justice was harsh for men like him. Derek had heard through Peck that William had been attacked twice already, spent time in solitary for his own protection, lived in constant terror. Good, Derek thought coldly. Let him live in fear like Lucas had. Let him know helplessness. Let him understand that some debts can never be repaid. By spring, life had found a new rhythm. Lucas started second grade at a different school, where no one knew his history. Constance returned to teaching part-time. Derek still worked at Northridge, where Craig Beck had become not just a supervisor but a friend, both of them supporting each other through the lasting impacts of William's evil. The trial for the network members began in April. Derek attended when he could, watching as prosecutors laid out the evidence, the files, the money transfers, the systematic abuse spanning decades. One by one, the men were convicted. Grimes was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy and obstruction. Others received similar sentences. The network was destroyed. Detective Peck stopped by the house one evening in May. I wanted you to know, William Johnston was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide. Hung himself with bed sheets. Derek felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just emptiness. I see. The FBI investigation continues without him, Peck assured. His testimony and records are enough. This doesn't change anything legally. After Peck left, Derek went to Lucas's room. His son was doing homework, tongue poking out in concentration as he solved math problems. Hey buddy, Derek said softly. Can we talk for a minute? Lucas looked up, setting down his pencil. Derek sat on the bed and pulled his son close. Grandpa died, he said simply. He was in prison, and he died. I wanted you to hear it from me. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then, is it bad that I'm glad? No, Derek said honestly. It's not bad. He hurt you. It's okay to feel however you feel. I feel safe, Lucas said. Like really safe, for the first time since it happened. Derek held his son tighter, feeling the boy's relief, his release from a fear that had haunted him. You are safe. You always will be. I promise. That night, Derek told Constance. She cried. Complicated grief for the father she'd loved before discovering what he truly was. Derek held her, letting her mourn the man who'd never really existed, the illusion William had maintained for 60 years before it finally shattered. By the time summer arrived, the Rosales family had rebuilt. Different than before, scarred but stronger, united by survival. Lucas played baseball in the local league, made friends, laughed easily again. Constance had forgiven herself, understanding that she too had been William's victim, manipulated by a master predator. Derek had put away his darkest impulses, the part of him that had been willing to cross any line, though he knew it remained. A protective instinct that would always be there, dormant, but ready if his family ever needed it again. Craig Beck invited them to a barbecue in June, where he introduced his own family, a wife and teenage daughter who knew his history and loved him anyway. The two men stood together at the grill, watching their children play, and shared a moment of understanding. They were survivors. So were their families. And they'd ensured that the man who'd hurt them could never hurt anyone else. The final piece of closure came in August. The Victims' Rights Coalition invited Derek to speak at a conference on protecting children from predators. He stood at the podium, looking out at social workers, therapists, law enforcement, educators, and told his story. "I'm not a hero," he said. "I'm just a father who acted when his child needed him. But I want you to know, believe children. When they're scared, when they change behavior, when they tell you something's wrong, believe them. Don't wait for proof. Don't assume the best of people just because they seem respectable. Evil doesn't always look like a stranger in a van. Sometimes it looks like a grandfather, a teacher, a coach, someone you trust." He shared what he'd learned about grooming, about how predators select victims and maintain silence. He urged the audience to be vigilant, to create safe spaces where children could speak up, to prosecute aggressively and advocate for maximum sentences. "My son is healing," Derek concluded. "But he'll carry this forever. The nightmares may fade, but the scars remain. If we can prevent even one child from experiencing that, if we can catch even one predator before they harm someone, it's worth it. Protect children. Believe children. Fight for children. Because they can't always fight for themselves." The standing ovation was long and heartfelt. Afterward, dozens of people approached him, some sharing their own stories, others thanking him for his courage, many asking how they could better protect the children in their lives. Derek drove home that evening feeling something he hadn't felt in months: hope. Not for himself, but for the future, for a world where maybe, slowly, the systems would improve, where predators would find fewer shadows to hide in, where children like Lucas would be believed and protected. He arrived home to find Constance and Lucas in the backyard, roasting marshmallows over a fire pit. Lucas's face was chocolate-smeared and happy, his laugh bright in the summer evening. Derek joined them, pulling his son onto his lap, breathing in the smell of his hair, feeling his solid warmth. "Love you, Daddy," Lucas said sleepily as the fire died down. "Love you too, buddy," Derek replied. "More than anything in the world." Later, after Lucas was asleep, Derek and Constance sat on their porch. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "We made it," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure we would." "We're stronger than we thought," Derek replied. "You're stronger than you thought," she corrected. "You saved him, Derek. You saved all of us." Derek thought about the night he'd hidden in his own basement, listening to his son cry. The night he'd kicked down a door and confronted evil. The choices he'd made after, some within the law, some outside it. The threats, the manipulation, the willingness to become something dark if it meant protecting his child. "I did what any father would do," he said. "No," Constance said firmly. "Most fathers would have trusted the system. You made sure the system worked. You didn't let William's money and connections save him. You didn't let lawyers and delays protect him. You ensured justice, Derek. Real justice." They sat in comfortable silence as the neighborhood settled into sleep. Two people who'd walked through hell and emerged on the other side, forever changed but unbroken. Derek thought about William in his cell, afraid and alone before the end. He thought about the network dismantled, the predators imprisoned, the children who would never suffer because Derek had refused to be passive. He thought about Lucas, healing day by day, reclaiming his childhood, his trust, his joy. And he thought about the promise he'd made that night when Lucas had looked up at him with terrified eyes. "I promise. He will never hurt you or anyone else again." A promise kept. The Rosales family would carry scars forever. But they would also carry something else. The knowledge that when darkness came, they'd faced it head on. That when evil threatened, they'd fought back. That love, fierce and uncompromising, could triumph over even the worst humanity had to offer. Derek Rosales wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He'd broken laws, made threats, operated in moral gray zones. But he'd protected his son. He'd exposed systematic evil. He'd ensured that a predator faced consequences. And in doing so, he'd saved not just Lucas, but potentially hundreds of children who would never know William Johnston's evil. As summer turned to fall and life continued its steady march forward, Derek remained vigilant. He knew evil existed, that predators were out there, that the fight to protect children was never truly over. But he also knew he was ready. That if darkness ever threatened his family again, he would face it with the same fierce determination, the same willingness to do whatever was necessary. Because some promises are absolute. Some lines, once drawn, can never be crossed. And the protection of innocence is worth any price. The Rosales family had survived. More than that, they'd triumphed. And in a world that often felt dark and uncertain, that was victory enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.